I'm Bruce Karasik, and today's show is being brought to you by JRA Nation. So what is JRA Nation, you may ask? JRA Nation is the new political advocacy arm of the Jewish Republican Alliance. We formed this 501c4 corporation so we can get actively involved in making a difference in both local and national political elections and be an excellent advocate for great candidates like Congressman Darrell Issa and help him get elected. So today, we're so glad you're here for this 11th hour of pre-election conversation. We also have Rabbi David Baron, Rabbi Michael Barclay, and Congressman Issa are all here today. And we're going to be discussing some very important topics: ballot harvesting, mail-in ballots, the rise of anti-Semitism, freedom and liberty, and all types of other questions that could come from our audience. The very important 50th district race is coming up, and it's essential that we do what we can to make sure that we elect Darrell Issa and send him to Congress where he can help fight for the values and issues that are important to us all. We'll be talking to all three of our guests in just a minute, but first, all three of our guests have one trait in common that I have seen, and that trait is courage. Both Rabbi Baron and Rabbi Barclay were the only two rabbis that I knew about that hosted high holiday services this year for Jews to worship in person. They did it safely, they did it with class, and they refused to buckle from criticism from those who thought that they should not have done so. Both rabbis have written strong op-ed pieces discussing their points of view and their views on world and local matters. And Darrell Issa has always had the courage to speak out and defend Judeo-Christian values and be a vocal champion of conservatism. Congressman Issa, Rabbi Baron, we're so happy you're all here today. And I will now turn it over to fellow co-founder, Mitch Silberman. Mitch?
Hello, JRA community. It is always so great when we are together. Many of you attended the Candace Owens event we held on March 11th, literally 2 days before the lockdown began. I said something that night that bears repeating given our proximity to the election, which is this. George Washington fathered our country, Abraham Lincoln reunited our country, Ronald Reagan renewed our country, and Donald Trump has rescued our country. This man has struck such a nerve in our country with so many people on our side and unfortunately on the other side. Let's talk about our side for a moment. There has never been anything like these Trump rallies before. I mean, you can't compare them to Obama rallies or Bush rallies or Clinton rallies. This didn't exist. So the passion, the chord that this man has struck in our nation is really unparalleled. I've been to many of their rallies. I encourage you to do the same. All kinds of people there, young, old, white, black, Hispanic, Asian, men, women, suits, people like me that wear suits normally, and also people with covered head to toe and tattoos that have long beards, long hair. This man has awoken our passion for our country, our love of country, how remarkable it is, and it's so patriotic. When you see these Trump banners, there are just as many American flags. So it is incredible, and for that we thank him. We have never seen this kind of courage before, this kind of battling for the American way. But on the other side, the chord that he has struck is so unfortunate. Now, I'm not talking about the hard lefties, because there's really not much we can do about that. The people who hate America, who just hate, there's nothing we can do about that. But in my life, in your life, there are good, wonderful people that really do acknowledge the powerful, positive impact President Trump has had in Israel and the world, and yet they can't wait to vote against him. At first, we used to joke and call it TDS, right? Trump derangement syndrome. It's not funny anymore. It's a real thing. I don't know what you can do about it. Over the weeks, I've shared with you some ideas you can do. But in the meantime, we are 5 days away from the most consequential election of our lifetime. Can you make one more call? Can you donate one more time? Can you make a few more phone calls? Can you share one more thoughtful video? Can you pass along one more thoughtful article? Is there someone you can encourage to vote? Because this is it. We are here. And I'm going to leave you with a couple of quotes which are really apropos for today. If you're feeling helpless, help someone. Who is that someone? President Trump. What is that something? Our beloved country. And also, I'm going to echo what Bruce said. I have a great quote from General Patton, which is so appropriate for all three of our special guests today. I find that moral courage is the most valuable and usually absent characteristic. Well, all three of our guests today are abundant with courage, and we thank you for that. I'm going to give a very brief intro to each of these special guests. David Baron is the founding rabbi of the largest arts and entertainment synagogue in the United States, Temple of the Arts in Beverly Hills. He is the best-selling author and founding advisory board member of the Museum of the Bible in Washington, D.C. Rabbi Barclay is an author, college professor, and the recipient of the 2010 Distinguished Humanitarian Award for B'nai Zion Foundation. He is the author of Sacred Relationships, Biblical Wisdom for Deepening Our Lives Together. He's also the spiritual leader of Temple Ner Simcha in Westlake Village, California, which I attend. Congressman Darrell Issa is a Republican candidate for the California's 50th Congressional District, a businessman, a very successful one at that, a former member of Congress, a strong advocate for government oversight and accountability, and chairman emeritus of the Consumer Technology Association. In 2018, he was nominated by President Donald Trump to serve as director of the U.S. Trade and Development Agency. Gentlemen, welcome.
Thank you for having us.
Well, my first question is for Rabbi Baron. I know it was important for you to be on here today. You wrote a recent op-ed piece that was published, and you spoke out about this important 50th district congressional race where Congressman Issa is running against someone that you believe and that we believe would not be a friend to Jews and to Israel. So I wonder if you would like to talk a little bit about that.
Sure, thank you. It's an honor to be here. Thank you for having me join you today. I'm a big fan of Congressman Issa. I think if we re-elect him by supporting Darrell Issa for Congress.com, we're going to have a strong vote and a voice for Israel in the United States House of Representatives. And that's really important because we lost two great spokespeople, Ed Royce and Eliot Engel, from different political perspectives, but they shared that support for the important alliance between the state of Israel and our country, the United States of America. So for that reason alone, I'm really behind Darrell Issa. But recently I attended a memorial service at the home of the French Consul General. And we held a memorial for Samuel Paty, a French teacher who was brutally beheaded by a Muslim extremist in France. And now we've learned a few days later there was another woman beheaded in France and two other people killed in a church. And this is the most recent manifestation of Islamic extremism. And the opponent to Darrell Issa in this race, Kampa Najjar, he's cut from the same cloth as Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib. And to me, they are the most vile kinds of anti-Semitic, anti-Zionist candidate individuals who serve in the United States House. And for me, it's really important that we have someone who's a counterbalance to that troika. And I think that for me personally, making sure that we learn the lessons of the past, you can't say, how did we end up with somebody who's so hostile to American interests and the relationship that now is beginning to blossom in the Arab world with the recent Abraham peace treaties? How did we end up with that? You can't ask yourself that question if you didn't learn the lessons of the past. And the lessons of the past demand that if we do have individuals who are Americans, who have a Muslim religious perspective or practice, that they stand up and condemn these kinds of violent extremist acts. And he's failed to do so. We looked on his website, scrutinized it, no condemnation of these kinds of actions. And to me, that speaks to values. French President Macron said it so beautifully. He said, this is an attack on our values, on our Western civilization, not just on individual people. And for me, that's true here in the United States as well. This is an attack on our value system if we fail to support the candidates who reflect the values we believe in. And I think Darrell represents those values for me, and his opponent is just so on the opposite end of the scale that I can't imagine anyone supporting him.
Wow, excellent. Rabbi Barclay, I want to ask you a follow-up question on that very topic. Your courage was first exhibited to me at High Holidays last year when you called out by name members of Congress who were overtly anti-Semitic. And I turned to my wife and I said, wow, You are not being political, but you are so standing up for Israel and Judaism. What inspired you to do that, and what kind of grief did you get from your congregation for calling out members of Congress by name for their anti-Semitic words and actions?
Thank you for having me here, both of you, and Congressman, good luck in next week. We need you there. Mitch, you and Bruce both know, because you're congregants, I'm committed to not talking politics from the pulpit. I don't think a rabbi should do that. I don't think we should push left or right from the pulpit. We can write about it personally. We can speak about it personally. We can do what we're doing here. I don't want to go to a temple and hear someone preach leftist or right politics. That's not our job. I think it is our job to protect the Jewish people, though, and to call out anti-Semitism everywhere we see it. Tlaib and Omar, or as President Trump calls them, AOC +3. These are people who are truly, they want us gone. They want Israel gone. They are supportive of BLM, an organization whose manifesto clearly states that Israel is an apartheid nation committing genocide. And they don't care. They are supportive of BLM, whose Los Angeles chapter led by Melina Abdullah, when asked why did she pick that area of Los Angeles to have riots as opposed to where the federal building was or where the city hall is, her specific comment was, I wanted the people there to feel pain. And I think we need to call out anti-Semitism everywhere it is. Most of us grew up in a generation where anti-Semitism was subverted. Still existed, but it was more quiet. And then in the 80s and 90s, became voiced as anti-Israel. And now with people like Tlaib and Omar, they're blunt about it. The Jews are all about the Benjamins, comments like that. And as I said at that High Holidays last year, it was a whole talk about anti-Semitism and the history of it and where we are now and where it's going. And as I said then, look, if you're on the left, get rid of the anti-Semites and put someone else in. And if you're on the right, get rid of the anti-Semites. I'm very clear about that, not just on High Holidays, but throughout the year, as you know. The columns I write for PJ Media. And this year, especially the last couple of months, I've received more hate mail than I ever thought I could receive from Jews. We lost a certain percentage of people last year when I said that at High Holidays, and it wasn't a political issue. It was, let's just protect our people. We lost a certain amount of people this year because we chose to have live services, even though we also streamed them, and even though we took all the efforts to make sure that it was safe, and we found out, thank God, not one person got sick a month later. So, we spent the effort, time, and energy to make it happen, and yet I've gotten vitriolic hate mail. The sad part is that some of it is from Jews, some of it is from families that I've helped out extensively over the years, and some of it was hate-filled vitriol from Jewish clergy as well, who feel that their responsibility is their religion is less Judaism than it is political leftism. So I think it's just really important that as rabbis, I've become the old 18th century rabbi. The question is it good for the Jews? And Congressman Issa, Congressman Issa, and President Trump, and these are men who are good for the Jews. And to even question that is kind of silly. We need to support the congressman. We need to support people in Congress like that, the senators, and certainly President Trump, who has been so amazing for the Jewish people and for Israel.
Thank you, Rabbi Barclay. So well said. Congressman Issa, I've always been a big admirer of yours. And in recent weeks, during our really great phone calls we've had, and when you were on our show, I've gotten a chance to know you. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a good man, and we need to support him. Congressman, talk a little bit about why this election is important in the 50th district and the differences between you and your opponent, and how that affects not only the country, but also will affect the Jewish community.
Well, thank you, Bruce. And let's start off basically by starting by saying that the discussion began dealing with these terrible beheadings and attacks in France. We often talk about anti-Semitism, and it's easy to focus on the strife in the Middle East or on anti-Semitism close to home. But the fact is, France has, over just my 20 years of public involvement, has gone from hidden anti-Semitism to, in fact, evolving and emerging open anti-Semitism, and it's spreading throughout Europe. And it's one of the areas in which I'm very proud that President Trump, well, on one hand, standing with Israel and bringing about the Abraham Peace Accords and much more to come, but at the same time, throughout the world, having our foreign policy under Secretary Pompeo really lead with, we're not going to tolerate anti-Semitism, and we're going to denounce it wherever we see it. And for Rabbi Barclay, that's really one of the things that I had the opportunity to work on in Congress, and there's a lot more to be done. Most people know me from oversight, from the work that I do on waste, fraud, and abuse, but my other two committees are foreign affairs, where I'm given the opportunity to work with leaders in the region, including Prime Minister Netanyahu for, well, he was actually still the finance minister when I started working with him, but throughout the years. But the other one is the Judiciary Committee, and where we're balancing freedom of speech, freedom of religion, and freedom of those who want to express what is wrong. Meaning, freedom of religion is no good if you're prevented from speaking your mind from the pulpit on things that affect your religion and your parishioners. Freedom of speech is perfectly free to say terrible things, but we should be free to denounce them. And that's one of the challenges that we're all going to face after this election. If as I believe will happen, President Trump is elected for 4 more years, I know that the peace accords are going to continue to spread. I know that what he has started, he will continue. But we will still have the challenges of anti-Semitism in Europe, open as it is. And we're still going to have the challenge that during this pandemic, we have seen religious leaders of all denominations basically told that what they do, even though it's protected specifically in the Constitution, is non-essential. Well, quite frankly, marijuana dispensaries are essential. That's got to change. We've got to make it clear that you determine as an essential service whether or not tending to your parishioners in a particular way is appropriate. And by the way, all religious leaders for centuries have put their life on the line in many, many ways, openly, in order to push their faith. There are too many martyrs throughout history for us to pretend that it's all about safety. We cannot put safety ahead of the work you do. So I commend both of you for conducting High Holy Days, both by Zoom and for those who could come directly. And I've said the same thing to Christian leaders throughout my district. If I can switch very, very quickly, the 50th Congressional District is a very conservative district. I represented a third of it for a very long time. And then in redistricting, it was given a different number to a different member. But it's also one in which they're having to choose between two people who trace their roots back to the region, one to the Palestinian area, the other to Gaza, actually. And myself, my grandfather came from Lebanon. But we couldn't be more different. I grew up in a Jewish neighborhood. I had the opportunity to be immersed in surrounded by people of the Jewish faith. And I got the opportunity fairly early on to go to Israel and to participate in so many things that make me appreciate the importance of maintaining and expanding the sovereignty of the Jewish state. My opponent grew up in Gaza for a number of years, and although he has said some very nice things publicly, we've also seen that when he's behind closed doors with many of his supporters, he says some of the most hateful things. And I would prefer that he be like the Squad, so that at least we would know where he stands, than to be somebody who tells each group a different thing, so that at the end of the day, you can only assume that he must be lying to you. There's an old expression: if someone is lying to somebody else, do not assume they are telling you the truth. That is the most reliable prediction. So that's a little bit, and I think there's a video and some additional information that hopefully many people will get to know personally.
Great.
I think we have that video.
Yeah.
Are we able to show that video?
Oh, that'd be
Can we
great.
get it up?
Mark and Tracy, can that be queued up?
While they're working on it.
Yeah,
Okay.
we are gonna, I'll get that rolling for you just right now.
Okay.
I'm Darrell Issa, and I approve.
Amar Kampanajjar created a bloody propaganda video with the PLO. Not only did Amar write and produce this violent piece of anti-Israeli propaganda, but he closely worked with a senior PLO leader to raise funds overseas to finance it. Amar promised to thank financiers with personal letters from His Excellency Yasser Najjar, a PLO ambassador. It's Amar Kampanajjar's own actions that he must answer for.
I'm Darrell Issa, and I approve this.
Very good.
Now that's a short clip, and one of the things that's interesting about it is that it's been out there. The source material, this anti-Israel material, has been out there since 2012. And what makes it so interesting is my opponent wants to be known as Kampanajjar. He wants to talk about his Mexican-American mother. He completely ignores his father, who is a PLO ambassador, for a reason, and that is that his close relationship and his working with them has continued. And it's the best example of, if you think you don't like the squad, wait till you see somebody who is pretty much PLO royalty.
Very powerful. Wow, Congressman. Rabbi Baron, you wrote an op-ed piece and you opened it up with a quote from George Santayana, which is, I think, a quote everyone on this broadcast probably is very familiar with. Those who do not learn from the past are condemned to repeat it. What do you see going on today in the Jewish community? Because I know we get questions all the time about why are Jews supporting a party that is so against them. So how would you apply that op-ed and that quote to what you see going on today?
Well, you know, another quote is, if someone tells you what they're going to do, believe them. If it's a Nazi, if it's a communist, if it's someone like Najjar, who is clearly taking a position of lauding his ancestor, his grandfather, who was the mastermind of the Olympic massacre in Munich in 1972. So not only did he not condemn his grandfather, he lauded him, he praised him indirectly, and he denies that, but the facts are the facts. You can't erase what you put online. The other component of it is he tries to deflect by saying, well, I've got a Jewish girlfriend, and his Jewish girlfriend, and I put the word Jewish in quotes, his Jewish girlfriend is the granddaughter of Irwin Jacobs, the founder of Qualcomm. So we know there has to be a lot of funding from his campaign coming from people who are just lifelong hardened Democrats who won't look at the individual or the candidate. They have this blind allegiance to the party instead of looking at the reality on the ground. And sadly, that is the condition of many Jewish people. They won't step away from their historic loyalty to one party and look at who are the actual candidates. And that's tragic. And you know, the Jews in Germany, many of them prominent Jewish community members, veterans of World War I, defending Germany, fighting on the German side. Oh, this will never happen here. Hitler is just a crazy lunatic. He'll never come into power. This could never happen here. And sadly, we're seeing a replay here. So if we don't learn the lessons of the past, and we don't learn that an individual whose values are so absent that they fail to condemn acts of terrorism today, and they laud grandparents, ancestors who were masterminds of mass murder, you really are going to get what you deserve. And hopefully we can wake people up to realize that the only way not to repeat the mistakes of the past are to look with eyes wide open and to vote the individual, the person who you know has the value system that reflects your own.
That was so well said, so well said. Rabbi Barclay, you have written a lot of amazing op-ed pieces as well. And it's very interesting that one that you wrote in August is kind of apropos for what's going on now. In recent days, both the Los Angeles Dodgers and the Los Angeles Lakers have been champions of basketball and baseball. But in August, you wrote a piece that talked about how athletes need to stop bullying the world and about boycotting professional sports who endorse organizations like Black Lives Matter. I wonder if you would comment a little bit about that piece.
Bruce, you know me, as does Rabbi Baron and Mitch. I love athletics. I mean, I taught meditation to professional athletes. You know how much I love sports. I'm aware the Dodgers won the World Championship, but only tangentially, because there's no baseball in our home. We're golf home only these days. Look, BLM is very clear what it is, and just this week they applied for political party status in the United Kingdom. I don't say this kind of statement easily. It is an evil organization, and it has always been a political organization as a manifesto, like a political party. People need to remember that in 1928, the Nazis only got 2% of the vote in Germany, and 5 years later, let's see what happened. We need to be conscious of that. Athletes are performers. Getting paid a lot of money to do something they love, and God bless them. And they're worth every dime if it's making money, if they're bringing people into the seats, and if they're making the television contracts. However,
There's a question that was being
I would
added.
just-
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Rabbi.
when they put BLM on opening night on the field, we're done with athletics, trying to be political activists. They're supporting, they're bullies to the owners. The owners knew not to do this. They're bullies, they're insisting upon supporting an organization that really wants harm to come to myself and my children. So how can we possibly support that? And I'm very glad to hear that the NBA has made a decision that next year they won't be supporting any political activity. And I look forward to the time when the NFL and when all sports are joining that as well. Let's keep sports on the sporting field where it's about who wins, who loses, who performs the best, not about the politics. And until then, I will quote the great, there's a great quote that says, what do I do when baseball is not being played? I look out my window and wait for spring. Well, in the same way, until politics are off the playing field, I look out my window and I look at golf courses. So.
Congressman Issa, you said there was a question you saw?
There were a number of questions coming up in the chat room, but one that seemed to be pretty important to answer is, where is the 50th congressional district? And the answer is, it's in a place where people go to get out of the city. If you go east of San Diego and east of Orange County, you get to the 50th congressional district. It's places like Julian, Fallbrook, Temecula, El Cajon, Alpine. I have 11 Indian reservations, 7 of whom have casinos in the district, and they're all pretty rural, but it's one of those interesting districts that gerrymandering creates, absolutely carved out of, if you will, all of the urban areas, but it's lovely. And the only problem is, if there's a fire, there's a good chance it'll go into our backcountry, but there's probably the same amount of horses as people in this district.
Thank you, Congressman. You had mentioned how close your district includes or very close to Orange County. I'm sure all of our audience members are keenly aware of what happened in 2016. We went to bed in Orange County and we went to sleep thinking that, hey, things went well. You know, as I mentioned before, Republicans stopped voting on election day, and, Democrats stopped voting until they win. So here we are again. I know a lot of our members are extremely concerned about ballot harvesting, fraud. Please share your thoughts with us about that.
Well, ballot harvesting was 2 years ago. We're going to the next iteration of ballot harvesting, which was when our governor decided to send one or more ballots to every person who was registered. We literally have hundreds of verified picture reports of people who have received 2 or 3 ballots in their name to their location. And that doesn't include ballots they shouldn't be getting, but that's just duplicates. The governor ordered that every single registered voter, even if they'd never voted, even if they were just motor voter, and that puts over 5 million ballots in unsolicited out there, which is one of the challenges we're going to face. The legislature also added 17 days after the election for ballots to be received. So if they need more votes, I suspect that the letter carriers might just come in with them in some cases. But I'll tell you how radical it worked out to be. I, of course, had won my district 9 times, which included parts of Orange County. I was contiguous to Dana Rohrabacher and Ed Royce. All 3 of those districts were swept away in 2018. My district went from a district that I had won consistently to a 13-point loss. Ed Royce district on election day, young Kim won it. By the time they got done, she had several percentage points of loss. They had found so many more ballots that weren't there on election day. And the same is pretty much true up and down the state. So we do expect that every vote is going to be essential, because we expect there will be extra Democratic votes found. And many of them will come from these ballots that were sent out to people who had never voted before, but somehow are going to decide to vote now. And there's, I'm very concerned. You know, the president's very concerned. He talks about a lot of states, but if he focuses, as he did when he was in Newport Beach, on California, he knows we are the worst of the worst when it comes to the likelihood of elections being stolen.
Well, that's well said. Rabbi Baron, your temple is in the heart of Beverly Hills. We all saw on the internet, and you probably saw it live being there, the amazing rallies that they had recently with thousands of people. And yet we have a question from David P., who says the Republican or the Democrat Party is not the party of JFK anymore. So why do Jews continue to be on the left, even though this administration and conservatives have proven to be friends of Israel, friends of Jews in the greatest way in history?
Well, I think there's a combination of factors at play, and then I'm going to pose a couple of questions to Congressman Issa. I think part of it is the Trump derangement syndrome. There's such strong hatred for Trump, but prior to Trump, you still had 75% of Jews voting Democrat, and they are historically Democrat back to when FDR, who had a lot of questionable policies about the extermination of Jews in Europe. Nonetheless, he was revered as a great hero for rescuing the nation from the Depression. And so that perception that Jewish people as a minority need to support a Democratic Party and a Democratic president is deeply, deeply ingrained. And then you add to that, you know, a lot of Jews for whom social action is their religion. Not the value system of the faith, but a sense of social action, and social action demands policies that fall within the realm of what we would call the more left-wing mindset of the Democratic Party. So it's going to be very hard to for those people to move away unless they begin to open their eyes and see things in 2 areas that I wanted to pose as questions to Congressman Issa that also relate to this issue are the different approach, safe reopening of our society or lockdown, allowing the tech monopolies to continue to basically curate and edit what we can see and can't see, or a truly open policy where we can read whatever we want to read and make our own intelligent decisions. Don't forget, a lot of the Jewish people we're talking about who historically have voted Democrat are fed a rich diet of CNN, MSNBC. I mean, I have relatives, that's all they watch. And I tell them, you know, I try to watch everything. I try to read everything. Oh no, they only get their news from 1 or 2 places, and it's not news anymore. It's a very biased political point of view.
Very accurate. Rabbi Barclay, we have a really important question from one of our attendees, David B.
Well, I think those questions were for the congressman to answer.
Oh,
Well, I'm going to be.
Where is he? Yeah, where is he on safe reopening versus?
Sorry, go right ahead, please.
Where is he on the tech monopoly and its protection by Section 230?
You know, I'm going to be brief because these are areas that, you know, we could go on for a long time, but it boils down to this. Safe reopening is the Republican mantra, and the, safety first for the 0.2% who might die is certainly what the Democrats are saying. And I think that's going to be a strong divide from President Trump on down. And you see it even at county supervisor levels. It tends to be that way. The question of the tech companies is twofold. And I think there's some room, and this isn't a bipartisan conversation, but I think I need to be honest. The Democrats are talking about monopoly, which happens to be true. The Republicans are talking about biased behavior, things that we should cause Section 230 to be revisited and maybe even removed. That's where they're going to come together, is that, in fact, because these are monopolies, they have a choice: be broken up or be honest brokers. And that's going to be something that will bring both parties together, and we'll see how Google and Facebook and others deal with it. I would like to jump right in, though, on one thing. In the long run, we will change the voting of the Jewish population the same as every other population changes. And it's going to be a combination of those who believe in the values that are the Republican Party and the role models we choose to elevate. I came into Congress in 2000 with Eric Cantor, and you couldn't have had a better role model. And he rose through the ranks, and he was a great leader. But he was also, after Ben Gilman was defeated 2 years or 4 years into my service, he also was all alone. You cannot build a vibrant next generation of Jewish Republicans if we can't get good candidates to run at all levels and be elected. They need to be a part of society. And when you look at the makeup of Jewish congressmen, for example, it's pretty lopsided, 2 or 3 at the most on the Republican side. The same is true of African Americans, and that's got to change. So my challenge to the community always is, we've got a lot of good doctors, we've got a lot of good lawyers. Do we have enough people, and are we putting enough behind those people to make sure that they rise in elected office? And I throw that in because, anything else, and we won't have the role models that'll cause the next generation to think that being a Republican is pretty cool.
We do need more Jewish Republicans in office. There's no doubt that share our values. And I think that there's never been more of a contrast between the Democratic Party and the Republican Party today. So words of wisdom indeed. And who knows, maybe we have future generations of Jewish Republicans running for office in our audience today, Congressman, who knows? Rabbi Barclay, I do want to come back to this question I saw posted by David B. And he's the immediate past president of a conservative synagogue, and he noticed that the reform movement really has shifted so far left as a unit. And his concern is, we don't want the reform movement that's become so leftist to be followed by the conservative movement also shifting so far, officially becoming so leftist. What can be done to make sure that doesn't happen?
First of all, the conservative movement has already started shifting far left. Okay, it's not that it hasn't, it already has started. But the reform movement has officially endorsed BLM. The idea being that, well, they don't really mean what they say. As Rabbi Baron so beautifully said, if someone says it, they probably mean it. What we could do is, first of all, educate in Jewish values. Because Jewish values are about action more than they are about words. So that's number one. Number two, we need to recognize and stop some of the prejudices. One of the big ones being in the Jewish world, often I hear from Reform or conservative Jews how horrible evangelicals are, when in fact they are our greatest allies. The evangelical movement is fabulous. In your district, Congressman, you have one of the primary advocates, you have the Advocates for Faith and Freedom, Robert Tyler's organization, which I know you're familiar with, and Rabbi Baron is, that is fighting on the forefront of religious freedom to ensure the Establishment Clause is kept. It's so important. And I think what we need to do is, through education with younger people especially, teach Jewish values. And Jewish values are about social action, but the term tikkun ha'olam, reparation of the world, is not a social action phrase. It has to do with each of us. And Rabbi Baron, you feel free to chime in if you disagree. Rabbi Baron and I are very dear friends. I love the man very, very much. But tikkun olam is specifically about the piece of repairing the world that I can only do. I can't do what the congressman does. He can't do what I do. We can't do what you do, Mitch. It's not, let's go do social action and march for fill in the blank. And we need to bring Judaism back to Jewish values. And that comes from the rabbis, that comes from the leadership. And for David, who was the past president of a conservative synagogue, I think one of the things that every conservative synagogue president could do is just make it clear to their rabbi, don't talk politics from the pulpit. 2 rules: don't ever talk politics from the pulpit. Don't ever badmouth Israel from the pulpit. Because if you do, the anti-Semites are going to say, look what he did. Those 2 rules will start the process changing. We just don't, it's insane that the reform movement has already adopted so many of these values, as is the conservative.
So well said. Congressman Issa, one of the important issues that are facing our country right now that President Trump has tried to work on, and when you get to Washington, maybe you can help clean some of this up, but corruption is running wild. I mean, we had a past president whose administration investigated a president and tried to bring him down through almost like a coup. You had the FBI and intelligence involved in that. Now we find out that the FBI has had this, Hunter Biden laptop for months and no one ever knew it. We have mail-in ballots that are going to different people, and I don't know what the internal controls are if somebody sends in a mail-in ballot 2 days before they vote and then they go in there and they vote in person again. There's just such room for corruption. When, and I'm not saying if, when you get to Congress, how can you clean up this mess?
Bruce, that's a great question. What I've discovered over the years is you do public hearings where you expose a particular individual like Lois Lerner, or in the case of Fast and Furious or Benghazi, cabinet officers that hadn't met their duty. But then you use that in order to make basic changes. Give you an example. There was a bill that I was able to get passed along with Senator Warner called the Data Act that allows you to drill down and look at every penny, not just spent at the cabinet level, but all the way down to a professor who pays an intern. Why did we do that? Because if you can follow the money, you can begin to follow where the truth is and where the wrongdoing is. We need the same thing, though, behind those closed doors in the classified world, what they call FISA reform. The judges are duped, as they were by the Justice Department under Loretta Lynch. Clearly, they were lied to, and as a result, they issued warrants and eavesdropping capability to spy on a presidential campaign, believing the material they were given that was known to be false. Where do we find checks and balances? We've got to create a neutral ombudsman who, unlike a judge, doesn't just take what comes to them, but rather is allowed to say, oh no, I want to see the source material. I'm going to take the time to second guess this. And in the case of something like a presidential candidate, even have a legislative mandate that says there must be a secondary review and investigation of that. If we do that, we will at least stem misconduct by people who have the cloak of classified, whether it's the CIA, the FBI, or others. This isn't the first time this has happened. It goes all the way back to at least when Lyndon Johnson told J. Edgar Hoover to check up on Barry Goldwater. He was dangerous. And so a US senator's aircraft during the campaign was bugged by the FBI. It's well documented, and it's a piece of history that we thought we had grown past, and clearly we haven't.
Can I just give a quick follow-up question? One of the questions I'm always asked, Congressman, is after all these investigations in Washington, a lot of the people who have committed this corruption walk away scot-free. You mentioned Lois Lerner, she walked away. Joe Biden is denying that the laptop is existing. It's now Russian disinformation. And what we saw in Tucker Carlson the other night was pretty damning. What happened in the previous administration and James Comey, and there seems to be endless investigation. How do we get people to actually, I don't necessarily mean go to jail, but have some sort of penalty other than just their name being ruined?
Well, the first answer, and the one that you won't like, is the Constitution limits us. So without a constitutional change, there is only one person who can, in fact, indict somebody, one person who can arrest somebody in the United States. Believe it or not, it's the President of the United States. The all federal authority starts with the president. Now, they pass that down to the Attorney General and to the US attorneys, but at the end of the day, all the power is still in the executive branch, and none of it actually resides permanently below the president. What that means is that our founding fathers did not think it was necessary to give the courts the ability, as they have in some countries, to send out a warrant for arrest on their own. They can only do it if someone from the executive branch brings them that request. And Congress lacks the authority to actually arrest anyone. So assuming that we can't change the Constitution, and assuming that impeachment is a pretty dull tool, not well suited to these kinds of offenses, there's one thing we can do, and it can be done statutorily. Congress can grant itself the specific authority to get to the court directly and without delay. And it could get to a district court, but it could also statutorily get all the way to the Supreme Court. If you look at these people that were not held responsible, for the most part, it wasn't that they just weren't held responsible, it's that there was substantial delay. When we held Eric Holder in contempt, it was over 2 years tied up in the court with Amy Berman Jackson, little by little deciding that we were correct before we got the documents we'd subpoenaed and he wouldn't deliver. So the first answer is, I can't do anything the Constitution limits me. The second answer is a good solid statute, which I believe we can get through the Congress because both sides of Congress have a vested interest in this. And many of my Democratic friends would like to have had it last year, but something that expedites the process so that we get in front of a judge very, very quickly would at least allow the court of public opinion to know that someone's done something wrong in a matter of weeks, not years.
Boy, Congressman, you are the opposite of Joe Biden in so many ways. You are specific, you're energetic, you give specific details. We know exactly where you stand. You're not full of platitudes. So thank you for that. I want to pivot a little to Rabbi Baron. We have a question from an anonymous attendee about Jews voting for Biden. And I think what I hear, and then I want to hear what you have to say, is they think he'll be fine with Israel. Like they haven't heard anything bad regarding him in Israel. I have a different opinion because of who he surrounds himself with, who he's aligning himself with. So if you could speak to that, it would be really great.
Well, you know, I have a number of problems supporting Biden, and that has nothing to do with supporting Trump. I just want to stay on Biden. I think he was part of the Obama team, and Obama wanted to create daylight between the United States and Israel. And I think he was on board for that. Secondly, I think that he was very actively supportive of John Kerry's efforts and Obama's efforts to have their place in history by the signing of an accord with Iran to curb their nuclear ambition. And how they could have overlooked, before delivering that cash, how they could have overlooked the fact that Iran is one of the major state sponsors of terrorism and not realized that any dollars that will flow, and these were cash on pallets, will go directly into the hands of the Republican Guard, who really are the Ayatollah's Gestapo. And they brutalize their own people who rise up in protest. And of course, they foment acts of terrorism around the world, supporting Hezbollah in Lebanon, supporting the other extremist forces throughout the Arab world. And by contrast, much to the credit of the president, he's created an opening for a new day in the Middle East with the accords between Israel and the UAE and Israel and Bahrain, and eventually other countries will come on board to join that process. So for me, I'm troubled by Biden because I'm not sure. I have serious primal doubts about how loyal he will be to Israel. And he again has demonstrated that in some of the comments he's made off the cuff and at J Street and other places. So I have reservations about how effective and supportive he'll be for not just Israel, but for the goal of engaging the rest of the Middle East into an alliance to serve as a bulwark against the ambitions of the mullahs in Iran.
That was really well said, Rabbi. I also share your concerns. I'm very concerned that if Biden wins, that he will try to bring the PLO and the Palestinians back into the negotiations. President Trump has basically effectively isolated them and Iran, and has now been bringing in a series of countries. I'm watching peace deals between countries where I thought would never happen, and I'm feeling there's a lot more to come. And I'll just throw this out into the group here. I think President Trump has been one of the best friends of Jews in Israel in my lifetime. I share your concerns, Rabbi, that if Joe Biden is elected, that everything that he has accomplished would be reversed.
I'll pipe in and say that, if you want to get to where you want to go, you've got to go in that direction. And obviously the Obama administration early on literally spent federal dollars trying to defeat Bibi Netanyahu's reelection. That would have changed the direction of Israel with a strong advocate that was making it clear that he would not tolerate Iran's nuclear ambitions. And then at the end, over the objections of many pro-Israel Democrats, that administration, the Obama administration with Vice President Biden, did the JCPOA. I remember when Juan Vargas, one of the Democrats that I serve with, who's a good friend of Israel, voted no, and he was called personally by, among others, the vice president, because they were lauding for that agreement. So I think the vice president certainly has to own that failed agreement, one that put 142 billion in cash into Iran's hands, some of which ended up with Hamas and Hezbollah. So I don't think there's any question you have that. But the other part is, it's not just that the last administration wrong direction. What if the next 4 years under a Biden-Harris administration simply was back to benign neglect? Benign neglect would be just as dangerous. Iran would continue with its nuclear ambitions. The lack of a deal would mean that another 4 years of Palestinian children would be taught hate in the classroom, that Muslim and Arab leaders in those countries that should be signing peace agreements with Israel would continue to be at a technical war status. So I would say that the most important thing is not even that he might be bad, it's that we have somebody who's accomplishing a lot, and 4 more years is a breakthrough opportunity that we can't afford to let pass us by. And I think as Republicans, but also as people who want the best for the region, for the world, and for Israel, we've got to make sure that we keep going in the direction that is going to lead exactly where we want to be 4 years from now.
If I could just jump in to add to what Darrell's saying, the missing piece for the Palestinians has always been leadership. Henry Kissinger said, I believe, they've missed every opportunity to miss an opportunity. I attended the Clinton Global Initiative, and Bill Clinton described wanting to pull the hair out of his head because at Camp David, he offered Yasser Arafat 97% of the West Bank, a slice of Jerusalem of the capital, and the return of 100,000 refugees, which Ehud Barak accepted in great fear, but he accepted, and Arafat wouldn't make the deal. So the leadership of the Palestinians has been so calcified, so corrupt, that until the people rise up and say the way of Hamas is not the way of peace is the way, you can't drag that leadership and demand one-way concessions from Israel and not a truly cooperative agreement. And when they see the bus leaving, the train leaving the station with other Sunni Arab nations beginning to create this accord, that will motivate them. That's the only thing that could potentially motivate them to create a peace deal and a two-state solution.
And Bruce, if I can add to that for a moment, you talk about President Trump and Biden, but we also have to be honest. Mitch said that the congressman is not like Vice President Biden. It's true, the congressman is both awake and not in his basement right now, which is really wonderful. But we also need to be aware of the fact that God forbid Biden does get elected, that the odds are it'll be President Harris very quickly, and that Ms. Harris has spoken out of both sides of her mouth multiple times regarding her support for Israel on the one hand and her very vocal support of BLM and all of what they're doing on the other, and those two are conflicting imperatives. So we need to be aware of that. And I think another piece that, I'm constantly in the position of someone saying, Rabbi, how can you be supportive of Trump? And as long as I'm off the pulpit, I'm happy to talk about it. I think there's a piece that we need to remember. Forgetting about Israel, forgetting about everything else, Donald Trump affected every Jewish child in this nation last December. By executive order, he included anti-Semitism into the protected rights from Title VI. That means that my children, who are elementary school children, you both know them, they had their bris at Rabbi Baron's Temple. So their elementary school children, 2 years ago when they experienced anti-Semitism, it was a real problem because there weren't a lot of things we could do about it. It's very, very difficult. Now it's protected by Title VI. And if for no other reason than that, then every Jewish parent needs to both support President Trump and support people like the congressman who are on that same team. If for no other reason than just for the safety of our children and what he has done that no one else did. If that was the only reason, that would be enough. And Congressman, look, I'm not neither Rabbi Baron nor myself. I'm far away from your district, but I know that there are many people in our district who want to support you in some way, and maybe you can let them know how they can do that, because it's not like we're being asked to go speak in San Bernardino or the Inland Empire, wherever that empire that you are is, and it might be really helpful for all of us, to know how can we really make a difference in these last few days.
Well, between now and November 3rd, the most important thing you can do is, in fact, to see if you have a friend or somebody that lives in the district and call them. If you can't do that, or if you run out of calls, you can always go on the internet to darrellissa.com, and lo and behold, you can give $5 or $2,800, and I guarantee we're spending over $100,000 a day on television. We will spend it all. Messages have become very, very expensive. But we're going to be together, all of us, after this election. I'll do everything I need to do to win this election. I appreciate any support of any size, but we're going to also have to come back together. This organization, I was excited, and Bruce, I appreciate all you've done to get me to know more about what you're doing. I've been involved with the Republican Jewish Coalition. Sheldon and Miriam are friends. I've been involved in it, but I've been excited that you're doing something that has a slightly different flavor, that the two of you complement each other. And so, getting people aware, and now getting them aware in a political sense, and calling them to action, this is going to make a big difference. There's no question at all that people always say, well, the Jewish community is very active. And then they say, well, yeah, but I'm a Republican. Oh, well, not as active. You're changing that. You're also making it, any organization like this gives the opportunity to be cool and be a Republican. And, one of my brother-in-laws is a Jewish Republican. One of my sister-in-laws is a school teacher in north of LA, and trust me, she offsets him on every election. And it's always good to see that that in fact they both are resolute in their politics. But it's a lot easier for my sister-in-law to go around talking shit-talking basically President Trump, because it's not much of a problem. Where, you know, my brother-in-law, hey, he looks at people and says, look, you've got your opinion. Let me tell you why I'm voting for Trump again.
Well, we all need to support you. We have some, ladies and gentlemen, we have some very important asks to make right now. I know people are always asking you for money, but now more than ever, it's time for all of us to step up. I mean, we're going to be posting some links on this chat. Tracy and Mark may have already done that. We have a link where you can donate to Congressman Issa's campaign. We have a link that will post the Temple Ner Simcha for Rabbi Barclay and the Beverly Hills Temple of the Arts. And we're also going to be posting a link where you can become a member of the Jewish Republican Alliance. For those of you who have already joined and all new members, and those of you who make a donation of $100 or more, we're going to be giving you away Newt Gingrich's latest book, Trump and the American Future. So I know we're all asking you at the same time, but it's important, and we're all trying to make a difference. And everybody in our organization has always been there when we have asked, and we have very, very strong confidence that you will be there again now. So I want to thank all of our guests for being here. Rabbi?
Bruce, may I just interject something?
Sure.
Temples need money and everything else, but for the next 6 days, personally, I would prefer if someone, rather than making a donation or a synagogue, which we obviously need, I would actually, it's a better investment right now. Please donate to the congressman, because that's what's needed today.
I'd like to second that motion, Michael. Yeah.
It's what we need today. Rabbi Baron and I and our temples will still be hitting people up for Monday next Wednesday. Okay, but we need to get for the congressman now.
Now,
I think that's important.
You know,
Okay,
I guess I'll make it unanimous.
Well, thank you. Well, you know, and we know what they say on television, but wait, if you order today,
Wait, there's
I
more.
just happen to have my book, Watchdog, that tells the story of holding government accountable. So anyone who goes online and does $100 or more to the link, I will sign one of these and send it out to you. My trusty staff reminded me that I've got a box or two of these, or 5 or 6. And, you know, it's not as large or as thick as Newt's. Okay, but he was locked up in the Vatican and had a lot of time to write it.
Rabbi Baron, why do I feel like we should give away Bibles?
You know, it's
The book. That's the book.
yeah, you know, there's an old expression: more Bibles are given, less are read. If more were bought, more might be read.
Rabbi Baron, Rabbi Barclay, Congressman Issa, ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for sharing this great event with us. Until we meet again, we're looking forward to a very successful next Tuesday night. See you
Have
all.
me back after the election.
Yes. Keep
Thank
praying.
you all.
Let's all pray.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Vote, vote, vote.
Yes.
Vote, exactly.